Alright. All this is not as technical as it may seem. I'm not a demographer, though I am an admirer of demographers. I look at their output. You can too go to the web. Simply put, the UN had announced that henceforward it would assume that average fertility in the poor countries would fall not just to 2.1 children per woman, as it had rigidly assumed through the 2000 volume. For the 2002 volume, it would fall to 1.85 children per woman. All calculations in this book, unless otherwise noted, are based on that 2002 volume. Here is one that arrived after the publication of the 2002 volume. South Korea's National Statistical Office announced that its TFR for 2002 was 1.17 children per woman. That was substantially below the 1.41 number reported in the UN's 2002 volume, and places South Korea among the lowest TFR nations in the world, and the lowest in South Asia except for two city-states, Hong Kong, the world's largest at 1.2 children per woman, and Macau at 1.1 children per woman. The 2002 differential between 2.1 and 1.85 is significant, a full quarter of a child per woman. But beyond the number is Copernican in the scope of its implications. Copernicus said the Earth moves around the Sun, not the other way around. Similarly, there's a big difference between a car moving forward at 5 miles per hour, or a car that is stationary, or a car that is moving forward at 5 miles per hour. What? Okay, I'm sure that makes sense. I'm not here to listen to that symbolism right now. The new UN population estimates that the world population would go down, not up. The car would move forward. But my lights, this data should change the way human beings look at their own species. Personally, geopolitically, culturally, economically, environmentally, I began thinking this might offer something of a challenge to the public deception of Darwinism. Weren't humans supposed to have been bred for billions of years with a hefty premium on surviving? By definition, a species doesn't survive with an ongoing below replacement fertility rate. No, I don't think the human species will unbreed itself out of existence. The drop from 1.1 to 1.85 was big news because it broke a long-standing UN conceit that every nation would rise or fall near to a total fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman. But concealed beneath the monumentous change was a big yet beyond the potency of 1.85 figure. For example, the UN demographers were saying that the European TFR of 1.38 children per woman would climb to 1.85 children per woman, up 34%. Despite the fact that the European TFR had fallen for 50 consecutive years, they were counting on an increase of almost half a child per woman, no small matter. As will be seen later, there is no particular reason to project such a major boost, and many reasons to think it will remain low. I had the UN information early and wrote it for the Wall Street Journal in a piece headlined "Overpopulation is overhyped." But I had been writing this sort of stuff for decades. More interesting was that 2 days later, a 4-column headline appeared in the Sunday New York Times, quote, "Population estimates fall as poor women assert control," end quote, with a subhead reading, quote, "In India, Brazil, Egypt, and Mexico, a dip in birth rates defies old theories." A sidebar displayed a graph that showed how the new projections would cut India's estimated population by 85 million people by 2050. By 2150, the reduction in India would be 686 million. Those 686 million never-born Indians would amount to more than twice the current total population of the United States. Might it be that when the official world body and the official world newspaper announced such a dramatic finding, the world movers and shakers would take notice and start thinking about these events that, quote, defy old theories. They didn't. Of course, within the population industry, it caused a tidal wave. Since the time of Malthus, there have been an apocalyptic cast to the most publicized of demographic findings. In their 1985 book, The Fear of Population Decline, Michael Tittelbaum and Jay Winter documented the downside of such history. Malthus was originally concerned about population increase. Neo-Malthusians in our time believed in a population explosion, which would wreak havoc both environmentally and economically. Indeed, global population grew from 1.65 billion to 6.07 billion during the 20th century. But with the new low fertility UN data, some alarmists feared that population growth would no longer be regarded as a preeminent problem in the world. Such activists denounced the UN Population Division as turncoats. The key sentence in the UN's 2002 report is the very last one. It says its findings reveal a demography in motion that, quote, will lead first to a slowing of population growth rates and then to slow reductions in the size of the world populations. Italics are mine. In one sentence, 50 years of demographic studies were revealed. In one sentence, 50 years of demography studies were revealed. Oh, reversed. Sorry. I would take issue with only one word, slow. I think there is a good deal of evidence to show that depopulation will happen rather faster, though these matters are relative. But before things settle, we may find ourselves with quite a few billion fewer people than we thought we'd have. Still, I salute the United Nations Population Division. It took them too long to break the demographic sound barrier, but it was a major accomplishment. We should all be able to think more clearly now. In coming years, I believe the UNPD will take its population and fertility projections even lower. Oh, sorry, just checking the time. So I asked some questions here. What's happening, why, what it might lead to. In the course of dealing with these questions, I asked whether we can or should do something about this shift. Will America remain the demographic exception and shape the 21st century? Might America grow to populace that startles even me? Oh, will America grow so populous that it startles even me? I was busily working away for a few months about the role of the new demography when the Twin Towers crashed to Earth, when the Pentagon was slammed, and when George W. Bush said that America had been thrust into a war to save our Western civilization. Many agreed, including me. When I began looking at the great game civilizations play, I studied Samuel Huntington's Tour de Force, The Clash of Civilizations, which maintains that America and the West are on their way down, while Islam and Asian countries are heading for greater glory, in part because of demographic trends. Huntington's book had been published in 1996, but took on substantial new stature in the wake of 9/11. I interviewed him for my weekly PBS television discussion program, quote, Think Tank, end quote. He is one smart fellow. I also read Pat Bushman's Anti-Mexican Screed, which throws up the fear of Latin invasion of America. His book is summed up neatly in its title, The Death of the West, How Dying Populations and Immigrant Invasion Imperil Our Country and Civilization. Buchanan had learned something about demographics and spun it into ugly cloth. He also knew a lot about geopolitics, much of it wrong-headed in my view. We had a contentious pair of sessions on Think Tank. All of this led me down some paths I had not expected to tread upon, which I have worked into my original structure for this book. The United States, the sole superpower, would be growing, but would it remain strong? The vast majority of our immigration was now arriving from non-European nations. Would they assimilate? If they couldn't, could a divided America remain assertive on the global stage just when it was most needed? Would we begin limiting immigration? The questions and others were brought to mind, even though shockingly in 2003, after diplomatic action in the UN and military action in Afghanistan and Iraq led by the United States. As pieces of U.S. Census of 2000 appeared, one demographic study did crash the headlines. America, it was said, would be mostly, quote, non-white, by mid-century. As we shall see, that's not entirely correct. Still, some of the troops of political correctitude were demanding that George Washington's picture come down from classroom walls, because the man owned slaves. Would we be able, as we once did, to teach American patriotism to American children? Who wins and who loses in the arc of history we stand astride? Clearly, demographics play a major role in answering these questions. This is pretty fascinating because I'll get to that later.